bounced around more states and homeless twice before I was able to drive. Fast forward, 19 years old, joined the Army. That's where life changed for me. I was literally, I don't know what your faith is, and I was literally asking God, please take me out of this situation. During this time, man, I'm literally on my knees asking God to find a way I could get out. Because again, I no longer felt the passion. I no longer felt fulfilled. And I was just burnt out. I was done. I no longer felt
trapped.
joy. Yeah,
you felt trapped. Yeah, you're
exactly.
Karl Jacobi is an Army combat veteran, a serial entrepreneur and performance coach who's generated over $40 million in the e-commerce space. He's built and exited multiple companies and now hosts the Grit Factor podcast. His journey is shaped by overcoming instability, setbacks, and rebuilding from the ground up. Today, he helps founders and high performers navigate growth, reinvention, and the moments when their old playbook no longer works. Check it out. Hi, Karl. Could you tell us your story? How did you get to where you are today?
Man, how long do we have? Yeah, man.
We got to keep the people on the channel. So give me the shorter version.
Yeah.
The shortest version. We want to know some juicy details.
I guess the best story that I could give you is starting at 5 years old, just kind of paint this perspective, born into a life of chaos. All I knew for probably the first 14, 19 years of my life was just chaos. Born into a broken home at 5 years old, bounced around more states and homeless twice before I was able to drive or legally drive. I will say that before I was legally able to drive, and no structure, no guidance, no nothing. So fast forward 19 years old, raised my right hand to join the Army, and I got structure and discipline, whether I wanted it or not. I got structure and discipline, and that's where life changed for me. And so through the structure, through the discipline and training and things that I got in the military, that's where I really started to change my life. And then, participating in multiple combat deployments and did 8 years. And I saw the money on the other side of the coin. At that time, money in defense contract was better. So I opened my eBay account in 1999. Okay. 1999. That's where essentially my e-commerce journey began. And I was still active, got out, fast forward, and I'm selling things through or a variety of things, mainly musical stuff, car parts and stuff of that nature on eBay. And eventually discovered Amazon in 2013. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so at that point, I did everything you should not do as an Amazon seller. Okay. Happy to dive into this more, but I did everything you should not do. You look in Webster's dictionary, my face is right there. I essentially what I had done is I hired before I learned the process, before I learned anything about Amazon, because I was a W-2 employee. I was not a full-time employee. I was a W-2 employee, still working 50, 60 hours a week. And so I'm like, I don't have time for this. So I hired a bunch of VAs. You probably already know where I'm going with this. I hired a bunch of VAs. I trusted everything they told me to buy. And at that time, there were a limited amount of tools, like OA X-ray, I think was one of the predominant tools that we were using, right? Tactical arbitrage was, Alex was starting to develop it at that time, and so anyways, so I did it for, I don't know, 6, 7 months, man. And I dumped so much money into the business. I'm like, this isn't working. I'm losing so much money here. So I stopped, I quit. And my W-2 life, the work environment got extremely toxic. It was wreaking havoc on my health. And not only just my health, but also my family and so forth. So I revisited this Amazon thing. And so at that point, I'm like, all right, I've got to actually be able to put forth effort, learn and apply myself and be coachable and actually learn, right? Instead of trying to find hacks to everything, instead of trying to find the fast way to everything, I need to go in there and learn the system, learn the processes, learn the tools. And then as I learn things, I can bring people in to then, take it off my plate, right? So, I so speed up the timeline a little bit. I got into wholesale by accident, and this was before wholesale was wholesale. And I found out, or way I discovered wholesale is I was at a store looking at the back of the bottle. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll just contact this brand because I'm always cleaning out their store, right? So I contacted the brand directly, and they're like, yeah, minimum order is 2,500. We'll deliver the pallet to your house or wherever you want it to go, and we'll get to rock and rolling. So that's how I got into wholesale, man.
What was that transition like? Like this, what were the challenges? Because
Mm.
that you faced when you were in that situation, in that specific time, because there's different pivots in your life.
Yeah, honestly, at first I didn't really even take the business seriously. It was more of a hobby than anything, right? And I think that was the biggest lesson learned for me is for because I had the security, I had the golden handcuffs, so I didn't really have to have an income from the business. It was just more of a way of, okay, this is kind of cool. It was fascinating, and I didn't know it as being an entrepreneur. I just knew I liked to make extra money, but it wasn't like a necessity. Anybody that's been in the military and it's been that's served, you're limited into what you make, regardless of how many hours you're at work. Technically, you're working 24/7, your own 24/7. But I didn't really take it seriously, right? And that was largely the issue that caused this pivot was I didn't take it seriously because I didn't need to, right? There was no sense of urgency there. There was no sense of anything. It was just play money for me. My wife was working at the time. I had my, income, and yeah, it wasn't, I wasn't really taking it serious. And so that's why, I lost a lot of money, because I could lose a lot of money. And so fast forward, when I was experiencing health issues and really it was in a toxic work environment, and I was like, I've got to make a change, and that's where the pain was more, or to the point where I had to do something. I had to adjust my mindset and take it seriously and actually apply myself and not treat it as a hobby, but start treating it as a business, and actually look at the processes that it would take to build this business. What do I need to do? How many hours I need to dedicate, and just go all in, right? And and for me, it was about eventually being able to leave my job, to do this full time, you know. And so yeah, man. I don't know if I answered your
So
question there, but
what were some signs that you've reached a point where you decided that I'm losing too much money. This is not working for me.
are we referring to when I was leaving my W-2 job or when I shut it
When
down the
when,
first time?
when you were leaving W-2 job, and after that,
Mm,
when you shut down the
yeah.
eBay part and you transition over to doing Amazon wholesale.
Yeah, so what became important to me, man, was that where I was working as a W-2 employee, I started to realize that comfort was actually the enemy of growth, right? Like I was not designed to be sitting behind a cubicle 8, or actually, more than that, 10 plus hours a day. And I wasn't really sitting behind a cubicle all day. I was in aviation, aviation, military aviation. So I was always on the flight line or in the hangar bays and so forth. But I had no freedom. Okay. Somebody else dictated how much money I could make. Somebody else dictated how much time I could take off. Somebody else dictated essentially my life. I had no life, right? Hence the term golden handcuffs, because they linger, they hang this dollar bill in front of you, and essentially trading time for money. And so for me, I had young kids, very young. They were, still toddlers at the time. And for me, it was all about chasing freedom, chasing something different that would give me leverage to where I can actually build wealth, not just wealth in like finances, but build wealth in the sense of having to build mobility, the flexibility, and as well as the financial security, and so that was the reason why I ended up leaving my full time job and actually pursue this full time. And I did it at the worst time slash best time ever because I so I had enough vacation time accrued. So is towards the end of 2019 when I'm like, you know what, I'm done. The work environment was just getting too rough. I'm working 60, 70 hours a week at my W-2 job and still working all the available hours in my companies, in my businesses. And I had two businesses at that time. I wasn't really doing eBay much anymore. I was still on Amazon. I was focusing exclusively in wholesale, and I had a 3PL. It started up a 3PL at that time, or a prep center. It wasn't a 3PL technically at that time. It was still a prep center. Um, and so I had two companies at the same time. And so it was late 2019, just before the holidays, end of the year. And I told my wife, it's like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm losing. The main reason I started this business, to start these companies, so that I can have the financial freedom and so forth. But I'm never home, because I'm always one place or the other. So we made a decision to execute, go do it. And a few months later, after Christmas and New Year's, what happened? The world got stupid. Um, you know, and so thankfully in the space I was in was e-commerce, right? Anybody that was touching e-commerce at that point grew as much as they wanted, and so for me, I actually grew too fast. I grew too quick, too fast, and that actually stifled, a lot of different things. But yeah, so that was a probably longer answer than you're expecting, but
When was good time to exit the business? You talk about the prep center. You talk about
yeah,
Amazon Wholesale.
yeah. So yeah, great question here, man. Let me give you a better picture here. So we had an opportunity to move down here to Florida. At this time, we were living in Alabama, and some business opportunities and just better opportunities in general. If anybody's been following me personally, and you and I may have talked about this, but my daughter was a competitive swimmer at the time, and she had dreams and hopes to go to the Olympics, and she was very close. Um, and so we're like, okay, we're gonna make this work. So, as you can imagine, not many resources in Alabama. So we relocated here. We met up with the gentleman. There's not so much I can disclose because of ongoing legal issues, but what I can disclose is that we moved. I sold my business up in Alabama, the prep center business. Sold a house, relocated down here, and brought in some partners that allowed us to use their warehouse because they were pivoting out of their business. They're a trailer manufacturing company, because at that time, they were a small business. Raw materials were skyrocketing, so it was really at that time a perfect storm. So I brought them in as partners. And so we leveraged their warehouse. They gave us all kinds of capital to leverage, and man, we grew like in nanoseconds. And so fast forward a little bit, we ended up creating another prep center, a true 3PL operation, 40,000 square foot warehouse. We had to, because the overhead was just monstrous. Um, Too much for what we needed for just our own business. So we created another 3PL, another prep center. And fast forward a few months, shortly after the start of this venture, one of the partners, we found out that he was betraying us, stole over, we lost well over $500,000. Not just directly because of this betrayal, but because of lost opportunities and so forth. Um, that crippled us, and absolutely crippled us, especially me. And at that point, Samuel, it really got me questioning why the heck I was doing this. It was no longer fun for me, right? The guy that was supposed to be in this with me, um, I treated him like a brother. I loved him like a brother. He was the only, I say this in quotes, but the only Amazon guy with me, and he betrayed us, betrayed me, betrayed our
Right.
friendship, betrayed everything, you know. And so we dismissed the man of the company. It was all on me now, right? It was all on me. The other two guys that were partners, they don't know squat about Amazon. They didn't want to know about Amazon. They didn't care how the sausage is made. They just wanted the sausage, right? And so again, I'm going back to work at 50, 60, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week. And I'm smoked, you know? And like I said, man, it was no longer fun for me. I no longer felt joy. I no longer felt like I was myself. I was snappy. I was not enjoying life. I was absolutely miserable. I was literally, I don't know what your faith is, but I was literally asking God, please take me out of this situation. Please remove me out of this situation. None of us, the other two partners, the relationship was absolutely tainted, because before this, I didn't know who those two guys were, so for all intents and purposes, they thought I might have been involved in this too, right? And don't get me wrong, we have a great relationship. Like, we're better friends now than business partners, which is kind of weird, but I don't have to rely on them. So we get along better as friends than business partners. But I ended up buying them two out. I had to take on some debt or take on more debt to buy them out. And during this time, man, I'm literally on my knees asking God to find a way I could get out. Because again, I no longer felt the passion. I no longer felt fulfilled. I no longer felt peace. And I was just burnt out. I was done. I no longer
You're
felt joy.
trapped.
Yeah,
You
I
felt
was trapped.
trapped. Yeah, you're in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
you know and so long story short, man, I ended up getting an offer to essentially get bought out of the company, to sell my company. It wasn't like this magnificent, I mean, it was a good deal, especially in that situation that I was in, but it certainly wasn't like I could go to Tahiti, and retire for the rest of my life type of thing. It was one of those things that I've got peace. Yes, I did get some cash out of the deal, but more importantly, I had peace. Um, so yeah, I sold all the companies. I sold the 3PL. I sold, the company, the e-commerce company, because we sold on Amazon, Walmart, eBay. Like, we grew it to a pretty decent sized company. We had exclusives. We had a management side of our company. Like, I put a lot of effort and drive into this.
What do you think is the biggest mindset shifts required when you are leveling up or scaling up?
Absolutely, man. And this is largely why I do what I do now. This is actually everything why I do what I do now. Because at that point, when life smacked me in the face with a 2x4, at that time, I didn't know I actually call it now. But at that point, I felt like a failure. I felt like everything that used to be fun for me, everything that I knew, everything, like I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Jimmy Smith, who you and I know. Very dear friend of mine. Love him to death. And he and I have had some very, deep conversations about this. And dude, I feel like a failure. Like I honestly, I feel like a failure because here I am. I'm coaching other people to do the exact same thing, to build their businesses and so forth. But I had to realize that season of my life is over. It doesn't necessarily mean I was a failure. It just means that season is over for me. God had another purpose for me. God had something else that He wanted me to do. It was like, hey, buddy, hey, I know you thought your life was good over there, but if you just listen, if you just trust me, if you just actually take the first step, I promise you, you will not regret it. In that area, I got disoriented, and that's why I call it disorientation, because a lot of high performers, high achievers, in that phase, they feel like they're a failure. They feel like they're a loser. They feel like that something's off with them, but it's not, because that playbook, that skin, that season that they're in, right? That playbook no longer works for this playbook, for this season, this next version of themselves that they're stepping into. That was the case for me, right? This playbook that got me to that point no longer worked. It no longer sustained the next level that I had to rise up to.
Why do you think this happens to a large percentage of business owners or even people who work in companies?
Honestly, it happens to everybody. They just don't acknowledge it, right? They just don't acknowledge it. But it is more prevalent to high achievers, leaders, because they're chasing, right? They're chasing growth, they're chasing ambition, they're chasing goals. When you're chasing goals, you're evolving, right? However, there's also a select bunch of people who have been reactive or they've been on autopilot for so long that they forgot that fire. They forgot that spark. And that's what happened with me. It's like I had been on autopilot and just reacted in my companies that I've lost my spark. I lost who I was, right? So I'm of the belief that every person deals with this to some degree, whether it's in their finances, it's in their health, it's in their businesses, it's in their careers, in their relationships. It happens to everybody. The problem is select few know how to navigate those changes, right? Okay, this happened in our finances. We got the two, in the face with a 2x4. The old beliefs that got us here is no longer going to work to this level, right? The same, and a lot of people carry mistakes with them, right? Like for me, there were so many mistakes that I made in my life, and I had to realize that I could no longer carry those mistakes with me into this next season, right? I can no longer carry the old beliefs that I used to have into this new system or to this new version, this new season I'm in, right? And so, and that's essentially the playbook, right? The old beliefs, your old vision, your old fuel, fuel meaning what's driving you, what is pulling you, right? What is pulling you in that direction so that you want to wake up and chase your dreams, hopes, and aspirations? Because without that, you're just a poor man with a rich bank account, right? When you're not chasing your purpose, when you're not chasing fulfilling, guys, trust me, I've been there, done that, right? I on paper, I should have been the happiest dude in the world. Massive house in Alabama, massive pool, beautiful cars, beautiful everything. Like I had everything that I didn't have, right? Or my kids had everything I didn't have that they're seeing with my wife, right? So on paper, I had an amazing life, but inside, man, I was miserable. I was no longer fulfilled. I was no longer.
How do you stay grounded when
Mm,
facing these setbacks and unmet expectations?
That's a great question, man. It's actually there's a couple answers to this, right? I can only focus on the controllables. And this is something my own coach reminds me of. Like I have people in my corner that keeps me sharp, that keeps me growth focused. So what to answer or part of that question is I can only focus on the controllables. Controllables meaning thoughts, actions, and beliefs. That's all I can control at the end of the day. I can't control anything outside of that. I can't control how you know, a prospect might behave or somebody pull out in front of me in traffic. I can't control any of that, right? Is it easy? No, but it is that simple. I can only focus on the controllables. And so when I reframe myself, like, wait a minute, all right, I can't control that. It's out of my control. I need to reframe. I need to take a few deep breaths, recenter. All right, cool. I can't control that. It is what it is, and move on, right? So that right there has helped me navigate any kind of obstacles, for lack of a way of saying it, right? And the other side of the question too, or the other side of the answer is I stopped having expectations. Why? Because as long as I could focus on the controllables and as long as I could focus on being 1% better than I was yesterday, that's all I'm good for, right? Or that's good. The moment I start having expectations, that's when disappointment comes into play. Because why? Because that means I've been watching the scoreboard, right? That means I'm too results focused. If I don't see the results, if I don't see the scoreboard, then I start getting false expectations. And this is where another area that I see a lot of leaders and high achievers, they focus on the scoreboard. They focus on the results. and you're setting yourself up for failure because at the end of the day, you can't control the results. You can't control the scoreboard. However, what you can control is the process. As long as I execute on the process with progress over perfection, that's all I can expect of myself, right? I can't expect anything else out of that because it's out of my control.
If we bring it back to, let's say, Amazon sellers,
Mhm.
how should Amazon sellers they approach growth when
Mm,
the market becomes more competitive or
mm.
saturated?
Ooh, saturated. That's a good one. Yeah. So with that, man, at the end of the day, you can only focus on what you can control, right? Look at your infrastructure. What can you control with inside your infrastructure? Yes, there's been a lot of shrinkage in margins. There's been a lot of shrinkage of everything other than, or let me rephrase that. There's been a lot of increases of everything except for profits. So, what can I do to put the ball back in my court to control that? Well, I could bring in automations or implement AI. I can implement tools to empower my team to be more efficient, to streamline. So instead of them taking 10, 12, 13, 30 hours to do a task, it may now take them 10 hours a task. Like you guys just released an AI tool for advertising, right? That's a key example. Like, how much time does that save an entrepreneur or save a team to be able to utilize that tool instead of manually looking through your advertising campaigns or repricing, right? When you can implement simple automations and simple tools to make yourself more efficient, then you can essentially buy back your time. I love Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. It's one of my favorite books. You should actually come out with a newer version, Buy Back Your Time with AI, because that right there is what's going to set you apart from everybody. Is leveraging what's in front of you. Don't be resistant to it. Leverage it, right? We were doing automations in our company before this whole AI that you see today, and that's largely what contributed to our success because of using automations, instead of double entry data on these different tools, right? Because in the Amazon space, man, you can have so many different types of tools for repricing, tools for inventory management, tools for your financials, tools for, I mean, you name it, right? Well, if I could plug in some automation so I could reduce the amount of data redundancy, guess what? I freed up 5 hours of my time or 5 hours of somebody else's time, and they can focus on something they much rather do, right? So it's through those things that you can control in within your own infrastructure of like, okay, yes, Amazon's increasing their fees. Is there anything you could do about that? No. But what can we do on our side to be able to be more efficient? Can we negotiate with our suppliers? See if we can, hey, can we get an extra 5% off or 10% off if we pay you, you know, a few days sooner or a week sooner? I mean, I've done that numerous times, right? Look at ways of how you can optimize your shipping, your inbound shipping, how you can optimize your PPC spend, especially with your amazing software tool you guys just released, right? So look at what you could control within inside your own infrastructure. Yes, it is more competitive. And you know what? I'm reminded by Jocko Willink. Good, because this forces entrepreneurs who take this seriously to keep moving forward, to keep evolving, right? I know some people don't want to hear that, but it's hard for me to say this, but anytime things get hard, I say good because it forces me to learn. It forces me to evolve. It stops it stops me from being complacent because the moment you become complacent, you start losing momentum. You start losing everything.
How are private label sellers different than wholesale and arbitrage sellers?
Mm.
Like the
Yeah,
challenges that they face?
some of the challenges are similar, right? I mean, there is the Amazon nuances, shipping and so forth, but there are some nuances that are similar. However, between private label, now full transparency, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a full, private label expert. Um, However, we ran an agency which is very similar being a private label because we had to manage brands and so forth, PPC spend. But to your point, uh, you know, private label, in my opinion, is the long game, right? It is not for the faint of heart. It is not for somebody who thinks it's, one of those overnight, get rich quick things. It is the long game. You have to have capital, quite a bit of capital, so that is the long game. Arbitrage, that is the lowest barrier to entry to get into the platform, which is great, right? It serves as an amazing tool to learn inbound shipping, to create your shipments, to create your SKUs, and to create listings, and to get acclimated without having to pay tens of thousands of dollars. So it really does that provide that barrier for you to learn. However, with that, you have to navigate, challenges, right? You have to navigate IP complaints and trademark infringement and all these, account health issues. And, the product you buy today may not be available tomorrow when you sell out, right? So, there are some, variances there. Wholesale. I loved wholesale because it was very predictable within reason. Within reason, I knew month to month how much I needed to order, how much money we were going to make, and we knew within a reasonable degree of, with data and so forth, that as long as we kept things in stock and keep, stay in our lanes, that we would be able to grow and be able to have a sustainable business. Account health, yes, we still had account health issues, but not as much. And when we did, the amount of times we're able to get them resolved was almost 99% of the time. There were a few things that we couldn't get resolved, but because we worked with brands and authorized distributors, it was far easier to get those resolved, right? So, but even wholesale is still a long game, especially in today's time. You get in there with the expectation that you're going to make money within the first 3 months. It takes time to scale. It's just like any business.
From your experience, what are the most common mistakes Amazon sellers make when they're trying to scale?
Exactly what I was telling you earlier. Well, one of which is they try to grow too fast. They don't want to. They don't take ownership of what they're supposed to do in their business. Right. Instead of trying to learn how to reprice, they outsource it to a VA, trusting that they know how to reprice. That's very dangerous, right? It's not just, repricing, it's also sourcing. You know, you're trusting that VA's ability, or actually no, you're trusting the previous employer, your competitor, another seller, that they train that VA correctly to source, right? So in my experience, one of the biggest things is not taking ownership of what needs to be learned. Learn it yourself, master it, then hire somebody, because you don't know if that person is doing a good job or not. You don't know if that person has problems. You don't know how to coach them. You don't know how to counsel them. You don't know if you're going to be losing money or not, right? Um, so that was the biggest thing. The other thing is the mindset, right? Mindset. And what I mean by that is a lot of people come into this business thinking this business is easy. And yes, at one point, this business was easier. It was easier, no doubt.
Easier.
Yes, right, exactly, easier. And I will tell you, the business still can be easier if you play by the rules, right? But so many people don't have the right mindset, because there are people that's selling this as being an amazing opportunity that you can just, make up money overnight, and that's just not the case, And so it's between those two things, the mindset not being correct, and not having proper ownership of the process and proper ownership of your company.
How can founders identify like what's holding them back
Mhm.
versus what's actually working for them?
How do they identify what's working for them? So at
Like
the
in
end of
your
the
own
day,
personal case, yeah, like from
yeah,
your personal experience.
yeah. In my personal experience, man, it really came down to being fulfilled, right? Am I excited? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm happy every day, right? I still have stuff that goes wrong, right? So it's not about being happy. It's about finding joy, right? Experiencing joy and putting my head down at night, knowing, man, today was an amazing day. Yes, crap went sideways, but you know what? I still got to impact people. I still got to help people win. I still got to chase my purpose. At the end of the day, that's it, right? Um, Starting to get emotional here, but that is it, and too many people are chasing with their minds, they're chasing with their heads and not chasing with their hearts. That was one of the biggest things I learned from Tony Robbins was, when you're chased with head, you're never going to be happy. You're going to be miserable. But when you start chasing with heart, when I say heart, I'm not saying you got to chase the business with heart. No, you got to have a mission, right? Mission meaning, what problem do you want to solve on this planet? And Lord knows, you and I both know there's plenty of problems to solve, right? But I'll give you an easy example. Okay. I'll use the one that Tony loves to use. You know, what inspired him was when he and his mom on Thanksgiving Day they were hungry, they had no money. Well, somebody brought them Thanksgiving dinner.
Brought them turkey. Yeah, I've read that. Yeah.
Yep. And I actually got to hear this story live, and so that changed him. He's like, "Holy smokes, somebody actually cares enough about us to bring us food, to bring us a meal." It's like nobody should go through this. Nobody should actually experience this. So he's like, you know what? So it made him upset. It's like, man, so he was passionate about it. He had fuel, he had fire that lit a fire in him, right? And so he's like, man, dude, I am going to, I forget the exact goal, but he's like, man, I'm going to feed, I think it was like 1 million people or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But that is my mission, right? But he didn't wait till he became a millionaire to do it. He did it the next day. He's like, hey, I'm going to start with 1 meal. Then it evolved to 2, to 10, to 20, 100, 1,000, hundreds of thousands. But when he was chasing that, that forced him to be in alignment with people that would help him make that mission come true. Well, those people were actually helping his businesses grow because you're networking with larger thinking people, right? People who think bigger, people who think about the same things that you think of, right? So when you think about those things, business is naturally going to climb with you, right? So that's the biggest thing is a lot of people are in this game for the wrong reasons, and it's not their fault. It's just that nobody's shown them, nobody's taken the time to say, hey man, I see you're crushing over here, and that works until it doesn't, because you're going to burn out. And on average, it takes 2 years, Samuel, 2 years for an entrepreneur to burn out. 65% of entrepreneurs burn out, and it takes them roughly 2 years for them to recover, to essentially get their space, to essentially recover from that burnout. 2 years, man.
That's a long
Think about
time. Yeah.
Yeah, think about the loss of the loss of income, the loss of the loss in that 2 year span, right? So so to answer your question, how do you know if they're I forget the exact question to be honest with you, but part of which is, are they fulfilled? Are they juiced? Are they excited to do this? Are they chasing? Are they doing this with the mission in mind? Whether it's helping veterans getting off the streets, or it's employing veterans, or it's supplying. There's a guy in a private mastermind. His wife was a foster child. And for him, it was like, man, it was very demeaning for his wife to carry around a trash bag of their belongings, right? So he's like, man, I want to actually start a foundation where kids have a freaking suitcase. Right. But he was overthinking it. He's like, man, I need to start a foundation. So no, dude, just start with one. Don't overthink this. Don't overcomplicate it. Just start with one and get people on board with you. I know there would be tons of people that will support you in that. And guess what, man? When you're chasing that, man, everything just elevates with you because you're around with bigger thinking people, and they want to see, they will support that mission, right? Customers will support that mission.
How do you keep burning, like keep your mission, keeping the flame, for example, for the mission that you have, and then also, when your mission, maybe it doesn't, with data, like if
Mhm.
you're at a higher level, you're trying to make decisions. Maybe the mission doesn't is not aligned with.
Yeah, man, that's a great question, dude. That happens a lot, to be honest with you, because they still are they're trying to think with their head instead of their heart, right? And so with that, the biggest question that I ask just about every person that I work with is like, what pisses you off? Right? Like, what problem pisses you off? It could be Tony's example, or it could be, child trafficking, that's occurred, in all these different countries, or here in the U.S. Right? Like, what's something that pisses you off that sets you on fire that you will do anything to solve? You may not necessarily solve that problem, but you'll put a big dent in it, right? And so, too many people still try to think with their head. They're still trying to establish the metrics or a metric with that mission, right? That's where people go wrong in this. It's like, okay, no, we've got to apply the metric to the mission. For example, I was working with a client the other day, a brand new client, amazing, agency owner, uh, runs our meta ads, and he was content, right? When I say content, he had everything. He had perfect everything. So on paper he was good, but yet he's like, Carl, I'm no longer motivated, no longer on fire, right? Because it, his income is now to the point where his kids are good. Uh, he's no longer motivated. So that's because you're looking at the wrong metric. You're looking at the wrong meter, essentially, right? So with that, I asked him, so dude, what juices you up? Like what pisses you off? Like if you and I have a conversation, we said, hey, we solved this problem, what would bring a tear to your eye? So he starts talking about child trafficking in Nepal. He was a part of a mission. He watched this documentary, and you could actually start to see his eyes water. Now mine's starting to water, but he was talking about it. I could feel that passion. It's like sweet. There you go. All right. Now, that's not to say he's going to start his own foundation and so forth, but he was like, you know what? All right, I'm going to donate $10 million within 3 years. Right? You see what I did there? I established a timeline and I established the goal of when I'm going to achieve it. Not in 10 years. 10 years, that gives you too much time. There's no sense of urgency in 10 years. You've got to be able to compress that timeline. Why? Because that gives you a sense of urgency. You're not going to procrastinate till tomorrow. No. What can I do today to hit that goal? What can I do tomorrow to hit that goal? Right? What is the process to be able to send $10 million in 3 years? So now he's on fire, right? His business has already tripled in the last 6 months. So when you're looking at the right metric, when you're looking at the right thing, when you're chasing from heart and not just for an income, everything just starts to fall in place. People sense that, clients sense that, customers sense that, right? They know, right? When they see when you're fired up about a mission, customers want to get behind that, clients want to get behind that, right? And they know if you're chasing revenue or if you're chasing mission. If you're chasing mission and it's in alignment, you will have no excuses. You will want to wake up. Not you won't be tired. Yes, you still be tired on some days. You're still going to feel that cramp, but you're not going to let it interfere with how you're going to show up for the day.
After selling your companies, how has your perspective on success and impact changed?
Dramatically, man. Dramatically. And I say that because it took me a while to figure out head versus heart, right? It wasn't even until recently when I was working with a coach that I've been working with for almost 2 years now, and where I realized because e- every opportunity, like I had people calling me left and right, man, dude, can you come into my company and consult for me? Absolutely. So I would take the skill sets that I've learned over 25 years to consult, to help them scale and build and so forth. But it wasn't, it was like as soon as I start to walk into the doors, something will happen. Not because of me, but just the opportunity closed, either because, they decided to go in a different direction or what have you, right? And it wasn't until my coach told me, said, dude, God's trying to tell you something. God's trying to tell you that season's over, man. But you still trying to freaking put your hand around the door to push it open. And God's like, nope, bam, and slams on the door. And I know everybody is probably listening and watching this is not a believer, and that's perfectly fine. And those that
Oh, okay. Yeah, you were saying that you were sharing how your faith guided you
yeah,
for some of the challenges that you faced, and you said that you went into different companies
yeah,
um, for consulting work, and then for whatever reason the door is kind of
yep, yep,
slammed. Yeah,
yep, yep.
yeah.
The door slammed, and it came to the point where my coach was like, "All right, man, dude, we have to have a hard conversation." He did this from a place of love, and he didn't do it from a place of hate. He did it from a place of love, dude. You're not tapping into your talents. You're not tapping into your purpose. There's a reason why God's closing all of these doors. Like you're trying to hold on to a version of you that's no longer alive. And you're still trying to hold on to that because your identity was tied to that. And that's why you feel lost, because for so long, that's all you knew. Like, dude, I spent 25 years in that, right? That's all I knew. That was my identity. That's how everybody knew me as, is this e-commerce guy, the wholesale guy, right? And so that was scary for me. I told you, right? Disorientation. I was disoriented because that season of my life was gone. That identity was gone. Like I had no idea who I was anymore, man. I had no idea who I was. I honestly did. I didn't know, because I had nothing. I had no companies. I had no, I wasn't selling, so I was effectively gone. I felt like a failure. I felt like a loser. And so it wasn't until my coach like, dude, you're made for more, man. And God's trying to tell you that you're meant to do something that's impact related, because your personality, that your fire, your heart, and all these things. We went through a lot of deep work to figure out what I'm made for, which is what I'm doing now. So when I realized that, I got the utmost clarity. It was scary as hell because I'm stepping into a life, I'm stepping into a season I've never done. I've never spoke on stage. Now I've spoken on dozens of stages, right? I never thought about hosting a podcast. Here I am doing a podcast, right? Don't get me wrong, I've coached entrepreneurs for almost 15 years now, but it was to essentially to do what I had done, right? To repeat the same successes, but to do the type of coaching I'm doing now, it's very different. It is very different, but man, I am so fulfilled. I love it. I absolutely love helping people win. I love seeing the light bulb come on and them believe in themselves again and be able to go out there and chase their dreams, hopes, and aspirations that they had at 8 years old, but something in their life tainted that hopes, dreams, and aspirations. When you can bring that back to surface, there's nothing more fulfilling for me, right? So going through that was the scariest, but yet the most amazing experience that I've ever experienced.
Let's say Amazon sellers, who are aiming to eventually exit. Maybe
Mm.
they don't feel fulfilled anymore. Are what should they be doing now to prepare?
Yeah. Honestly, it really comes down to goals, right? Your listeners that are watching or listening, just because they're fulfilled doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to be in that business. It just means that maybe you're chasing the wrong mission, right? You can still be in that business, but maybe you need to align your goals with what mission you need to be supporting. Whether it's what I talked about earlier, meals or homeless vets, or supplying, a backpack for homeless kids, or, foster kids, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to exit your company, but for the select few that are, they're like, yeah, I'm done, like I was, then you need to start working or removing yourself ASAP. Start implementing systems, start implement processes to remove yourself from that business yesterday, not today, yesterday. Start looking at Repricer. Start looking at your tool that you have, especially the AI Repricer or for advertising. Look at all these different ways to remove yourself out of the business, because if you're still part of that business, it makes your business it's a lot more complicated, because essentially you're the business, right? You don't have an asset. You are the business. When you are the business, there is no selling. There is no exit unless you just want to shut it down. And I don't
Right.
really advise that for anybody.
Yeah. So creating systems, automating what you can automate, so
Yeah.
you can remove yourself from that business. Then it becomes assets.
Yeah.
Where can we find you? Yeah, because you talked about mindset. You talk about
Yeah.
finding your mission.
Yeah.
And you help a lot of different entrepreneurs. Where can we find you?
Best way to find me, man, is go to my website, Success with Karl, Karl with a K.com. That's again, successwithkarl.com. It's got all my socials there. It's got all the programs. In fact, we're running a challenge here shortly that we're super excited for. It's a 5-day live challenge with me. But yeah, just go to my website and follow me on socials, and sign up for our newsletter. Get on my podcast, right? And that's it, man. I love doing what I do. I love helping people realize that, just because that they're in that season that no longer works for them, that forced them out of a situation, whether it's in their career, it's in their business, it's in their finances, it's in their health, or in their relationships. Maybe they're going through a bad relationship or something. Helping them navigate that transition, helping them develop their playbook. Playbook meaning establishing their vision, beliefs, fuel, and then direction. That playbook that will evolve with them over time. Once they get that, man, they will be truly unstoppable.
Thanks for your time today, Karl. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so make sure to go follow Karl, check out his website and his coaching, and we'll share a little bit more details about him after.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you, my dude.
If you're navigating growth or a major transition, Karl's work through the Reforge Challenge program can help you build your next playbook. Be sure to check out his programs and coaching to keep leveling up. And at BQool, we're here to keep Amazon sellers up to date with the latest strategies, industry insight, and connections.